It's you'll own nothing and like it.
Our first news story of the day. Last week, we finished talking about how Best Buy was going to be removing physical games and movies and Blu-rays from their outlets in 2024. And apparently, Walmart has hopped along the train as a quick follow-up here, as they have said that they're going to be discontinuing physical games in 2024. Now, I wanted to bring this up because this seems to be a trend. But Razor, you spoke about this previously.
Yeah, many years ago. I've been warning about this since about 2013, maybe even a little before that. It's the price we pay for convenience. You're selling your property rights down the river at the end of the day. And the thing is, you combine the perfect storm of vanishing property rights as a result of everyone downloading everything and a censorious culture that is cutting Trump out of Home Alone 2 and, all this bullshit. Just wait until they get to video games. You see what they do with localization on Japanese games already, for fuck's sake. Now imagine that in real time on any given goddamn game you own. Okay? They can take anything out. Fucking Duke Nukem, whatever, anything, right? That might be objectionable in the modern day. It's basically constantly enforced currentism. Is basically what that's going to be.
Do you think that is that's a reason why they're doing this, or do you think it's more?
I think the term is presentism. Sorry, but what'd you say?
Oh, I was saying, do you think that's why? Do you think that's a driver behind this, or do you think it's just a monetary thing?
Oh, I think it's a monetary thing first and foremost. It doesn't cost as much. They don't have to manufacture a disc. I mean, it's the whole thing. The stupidest part is they're losing out on money because if you transition to a place where you are selling like a really premium product, right? Like something that comes with lots of bells and whistles, I think it'll sell because collectors are there. There's always going to be a market for some kind of collectors, whatever. But they don't even release those anymore, right? The collector's edition of games now just come with a bunch of shitty DLC and a soundtrack you're never going to listen to. Like that's all it is now. If you got an actual physical collector's edition with like a guidebook or some extra stuff, some art or what, people would buy it. Absolutely. The collector's editions of very popular games sell. Red Dead Redemption 2 came out in 2018, had a collector's edition and a nice steel book with a big map and lots of cool stuff. That sold. It sold just fine. It's when a big game comes out, you can absolutely release these things. They're not doing it because they don't want to spend the money. Is really what it is.
I think that, I think this is, you talked about this in 2013. I had owned a game store up until, I don't know, man, late 2010s to 2000, may have been up to 2011, 2012, whatever it was. But I talked about this last week. I also saw the writing on the wall many moons ago, as far as it, ultimately, if you don't have to produce the box art, you don't have to print that out. You don't have to buy the little game, plastic game containers. You don't have to print the disc.
Yep.
And you can still sell it for the same price. What's the point? It's not like they're reducing the cost. And that's the thing you hear consistently. Well, it's a digital game. It should be $10 less, $5 less, whatever. Yeah, right. And you know who's going to be paying it? Everybody. And until there's a noticeable change in the drop of game sales, it's not going to matter. And what does that look like? I don't know. Like, just because 100 people don't buy it because they're pissed off it's digital now, that doesn't even move the needle. Nobody gives a shit about that, So Walmart has hopped on board on this, and I think this is going to really change. I mean, this is going to change video games in a big deterrent. This is throwing fuel on the fire of making that change. When you have two of the biggest retailers in the world not having physical games in there. I mean,
and it gives more incentive to Sony and Microsoft, who already want to get rid of those disk drives, right? They want to get rid of those on the consoles. Hell, the Series S doesn't even have one, right? They're releasing digital only versions of these consoles. This is absolutely gonna add some kerosene onto that particular inferno. And I guarantee you, next generation, that is going to be standard. Maybe not every single one, but yeah, they'll definitely all of the major consoles will have some kind of no physical, version.
Labs, can you look at see if you can find a chart of the difference between physical copies and digital games? Just the total sales between the two. I appreciate that. So I think the one thing that gives me a little bit of hope, and I'm going to go back to me being just a total fucking idiot for Nintendo, because I love Nintendo, is I think Nintendo will hold on to the physical aspect of it. Now, granted, the physical aspect is a tiny little disc or a tiny, but it's still something that you have, something
Which,
that's cool.
honestly, dude, at this point, is that not way more futuristic than some optical disc? Like, that's what's the little card that you put in your phone? Like,
Right.
it's got gigabytes upon gigabytes of storage space. It's utterly ridiculous that Sony and Microsoft are still clinging on to this disc when Nintendo has figured out, hey, wait a minute. Basically, everything comes on a flash drive now. Why don't we just put our games on them? That's essentially all a Switch game is.
Right. And when you look at a Switch game, this tiny little thing here, and you're like if you were to hold this up in 1990 and be like, this is how big your games are going to be, people would be like, what? Are you kidding me? And this is kind of crazy because this is the right size. And I think at the end of the day, doesn't this actually hold more data? It can hold more data than a disc, I think.
Depends on how you make it. But yeah, I assume. I assume it's like there's no standardization for it too, so you can actually mod it, kind of like what they did on the old cartridge games. They would add a new chip, they would do different things to change the game, like when what was that called? Was it VFX chip or whatever it was in Star Fox? Some of those games. Yeah, like you can actually change that after the fact.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's going to be one of those things where next year at this time, if I can talk, I think you're going to see digital sales skyrocket compared to what they are right now. Did you find anything, Blabs?
I did. So I found two different articles. So the first one I found was from December 27th of 2022. And it says that during 2022, 72% of video games sold on consoles were digital, and then the rest were physical. But then on this one, which was in January, so only like a couple of weeks difference, really, 90% of video game sales in 2022 were digital. Now, obviously, we don't have anything really for this year because this year's not over yet.
Right. And the lockdowns, the couple of years of lockdowns didn't help that any. Oh, yeah. Right?
It just only fueled the digital sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Again, it's a you'll own nothing and like it kind of situation. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have these. Look, and I made this point in I made a video called The Case for Physical Media. It was an audio rant originally. I put it up on my channel years later. It was originally up in like 2014, 15, 13, somewhere in that range. And it's like the argument I basically made is, if even in a benign example, like The Saboteur, which is an underrated game. I like that game. But it had some kind of patch where there was like nudity in the game or something like that. And you had to, I forget what it was. You had to punch in some code or something like that. And it was a big gimmick, right? To get people to pre-order the game, whatever. Anyways, EA wind up taking the servers down. So you can't do that. You can't even mod it in. It's not, so you're essentially playing a censored version of the game if you play off of the disc. And that's a really, really benign example. That's just some boobs, right? Like this is, you can imagine what they can do with a Steam game, which can be patched at any time. You don't physically own it. GOG is incrementally better, but GOG is getting worse because they've got that GOG Galaxy garbage. And eventually they're going to transition away from you having DRM-free stuff. You can just see it coming in the distance. In a few years, it probably will be. But, if someone wants to take my physical games, they have to kick down my door and do it. That's how that works. Like if they want to alter a single thing about my physical games, they have to kick down the door. Of course, we already kind of opened the door a little bit, like let them wedge in when we suddenly allowed these companies to get away with day one 40 gigabyte patches. Because these disc games you're getting aren't even really the game anymore. It's like a little bit of data, and then it has to be heavily patched day one, or you can't even play it in most cases. Mm-hmm.
Or there was like day one DLC content that obviously wasn't on the disc. So you got to download it anyway. So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Blabs, let's talk about those numbers you just threw out there. The idea that even, what do you say, 70 something percent? The low end figure was 70 something percent.
72% of video games sold on consoles during 22 were digital. But then I also have this article that says almost 90% of video game purchases were digital, and that's from like working with the BBC. So
That
I don't
is
really know which one to believe.
still
a lot.
Yeah, that is
It's over 50%.
still dramatically. Yeah, that's dramatically higher than I thought it would be. Like, if you would ask me what the digital game sales were, I would say at tops 50%, right? But to say it could,
What I wonder,
9 out of 10.
What I wonder, and this is probably the case because a lot of game sales have migrated over to that space, is are they counting mobile sales? Because if they count mobile sales, that's going to skew the number extremely. But still,
Good point.
It's probably on the PC side, especially. And honestly, with the advent of Game Pass, like, how do you count those? How do those figure in, right? I get Game Pass, and a lot of the new games I don't buy individually because I'm already paying for Game Pass. Does that count as a sale? Is that
also you gotta wonder, because I'm looking in this article, the one that has the higher numbers, and it doesn't say anything if it's console only, because obviously with PC you have no choice but to buy digital. There are no physical copies.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Is that just console?
Yeah, and nowadays, like, you rarely get a physical copy. I remember a few years ago, Underworld Ascendant was worked on, right? And it was a new kind of Ultima Underworld-ish game that was going to come out. And they had a Kickstarter, they had whatever. One of the stretch goals was just to be able to get a copy with an actual physical disc. And I got that. I actually did later on get that. But dude, that is rare nowadays. And that's a PC game, right? PC games, you're stuck. You're stuck with Steam or, God forbid, the Epic Game Store.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Man. And
I would have loved like physical copies for my PC, but obviously that's impossible.
Right. And I looked down at my Steam games list, and I have hundreds of games on there that I've never played. Right? Games that I picked up through a pack or some sort of indie whatever celebration or something. I mean, literally hundreds of games on there that I've never even opened or downloaded or installed. And then I think about the physical games that I have, and I realize, holy shit, I'm part of the problem, because I'm the, like, number one, I can't buy a physical copy of a game on PC like we talked about. But I mean, I don't know. I think the last physical game I bought was Mario and was Bowser's Fury, and that was once again a Nintendo game. I don't know the last time I bought a game for the PlayStation or the Xbox.
The last time I bought a physical copy was for Lego, the complete like Rise of Skywalker, all 9 Lego Star Wars games that came out last year, and I didn't even finish that game because I didn't like it. So.
And the classic example of this, I mean, you wonder why they're doing this. I was in Target the other day, and I got Mario Kart 8. I told you guys about it, and the new Kirby, right? And went down the Nintendo aisle, got those just fine. Went over to the Xbox side, and I was going to pick up 1 or 2 games of that. Both of them, they were completely out of stock. I called the guy over to get them. They didn't even have copies in stock. So it's kind of like the retailers have already kind of given up on physical stuff for the PlayStation and Xbox as it is, right? If it's not Nintendo, I don't know that they're really going out of their way to stock it. It seems like.
Man, and it makes sense with Nintendo, because Nintendo's audience, while it is, we've seen charts that say Nintendo's audience is a little bit older. It's in the core Nintendo game player is in their early 20s, but they do cater to a younger audience as well, because with a more cartoonish characters, and parents now passing those characters on to younger generations. So it makes sense to have physical, because the kids can't buy things in stores in theory, digitally, I mean. So yeah, it's interesting, man. And I think as you said, the kerosene is being thrown on that blaze, man. And it's gonna, if you don't like it, sorry,
it'd be one thing if it was all like Game Pass, where it's essentially kind of like a long-term rental in a weird way, because it's like you sort of understand up front you don't own that, you're paying for the service, not so much the game. Steam's not that way, right? It is presented as if you own it, and you really, really don't.
Hey, if you enjoyed that clip, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Would greatly appreciate that, so you can find more clips on the channel. And of course, come join us live Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time for our live Side Scrollers podcast. We would love to see you there.